Hi everybody, welcome back to the Moonlit Library. As many of you may be noticing, we are in a different location, and that gives me the opportunity to share a little bit about the Smutty Storytime experience that y'all don't usually get much insight into. I really like to present our flow as seamless and sort of an extremely professional, if amateur, visual. Unfortunately, this week demanded that we discover just how fragile that viewpoint is. So, this week actually presented us with a number of issues, starting with health. My allergies decided they were going to take a flying leap off a very tall building and absolutely annihilate me this week. So from Monday to Wednesday, I was completely down with the allergies from hell. Take one. So instead of recording on Monday, editing on Tuesday, and releasing on Wednesday, we got recording on Monday, discovering that reading was hard because all of my ability to breathe was just completely removed, so I was just panting like a dog. It was great. Then, getting home on Tuesday from work and figuring out I had just enough longevity to record half of our read, drinking a shit ton of tea, and completing the other half of our read, and doing our analysis. Wednesday dawns bright and early, and before I get online for my day job, I decide to check in and start doing a little bit of editing before the sun comes up. What I discover is that apparently my laptop has just given up on life and is no longer preserving videos anymore. I gave up on my laptop, as one would, and escaped up to the gaming lair where my spouse occupies to record our intro and our analysis once more. So you'll notice we're not quite so seamless because these all take place in different locations. But it's a really great opportunity to explain to you why I just powered through. The allergies, the technical difficulties, everything like that. When the everything about hyperfixation says I should just let it go. And part of it is because, actually the whole of it is because I love being able to support and promote indie authors whose work I love so much. To the extent that even in the face of technological difficulties, health difficulties, literally everything that could go wrong did go wrong, short of me getting, shot in the chest, I guess. And I still wanted to be able to share this experience with you because I love the books that we select. I adore the authors that agree to participate in Smutty Storytime, and I really just love the opportunity to be able to read these incredible books to y'all in the hopes that the 6 people who watch these videos enjoy this and get to know a world that's unique, distinct, beautiful, and fun through our reading. So now that we've sort of gone down how the sausage is made in Smutty Storytime, let's talk about this week's book. Because I'll be honest, I'm really unbelievably excited about this book. Because this book is phenomenal. This series is phenomenal. And a lot of the time when we talk about series, especially in the smut world, we are talking about interrelated standalones, which means that you're sort of introduced to characters, side characters, within the MMC and FMC's journey, who later become their own main characters in their own books. In an interrelated standalone, you don't need to read the other books surrounding it to be able to understand what's going on in the standalone. That is not the case with our series this week. Our series this week actually bridges the gap between romantasy and urban paranormal romance. We've talked a lot about the distinction between these subcategories. Romantasy is completely separate from our world and really has no interaction with our world. You'll see a lot of big world-building stories in romantasy. Urban paranormal romance, however, has an overlay on our existing world where this magical, mystical element kind of sits right on top of our existing world as it stands right now. Usually these things don't mix. Usually you don't have an urban paranormal romance that overlaps into romantasy because it is difficult at best to tie the two together. A few authors do it, not many. Our author for this week and our series for this week absolutely does, and it does it brilliantly. There's a true dedication to the overarching storyline that makes this secondary world that is accessed through a portal still feel real, even though it is not our world. It is aggressively distinct from our world, and then our world exists as a parallel on the other side of that portal. It is hard to do, and because this author does it so beautifully, that is why she is our week 7, technical difficulties be damned, author. For week 7, we are doing Inked, the first in the Gilded Blood series written by Rachel Rener. And I love this book for so many reasons, starting with the fact that this book was just sort of a serendipitous find. I found this book through a Facebook sponsored ad. Y'all know that I find a lot of books that I read totally randomly through sponsored ads, usually on Instagram. And this has gone really well for me. This has gone really poorly for me. But usually I get sucked in by a quote. Inked did not have a quote. Inked just had a synopsis and a picture of the cover. And because I don't have any pride whatsoever, I literally hopped right on that immediately right out the gate. The cover is stunning. It is absolutely beautiful. It's vibrant, it's colorful, and it tells a compelling story. Anybody who tells you you cannot judge a book by its cover is absolutely full of shit. Because you absolutely can judge an indie author's book by their cover. So many indie authors have to be so many things all at once. Candace Clark, our author for The Thief and the Painter, has become an impromptu graphics designer for her own covers. Allie Maddox, our Clawed by Cupid author, became an artist to create these covers and pieces of her books. Indie authors put so much love, time, and effort into what they do that you can definitely judge a book by its cover in the indie author world. It shows it's an external embodiment of how much love and care they have for their particular book. Inked's cover was gorgeous. Absolutely stunning. So that drew me in first. Second, it started promising things like mythological romantasy. Sign me right the hell up. I have no shame and will absolutely say, I will read that. 0 questions asked. None whatsoever. I don't care. I just want to read about the mythological beings. And the second part that got me. It wasn't just this mythological romantasy that spoke to my heart. It was this world built upon blood magic and tattoos and the mystique associated with both. Just a really, really cool concept. And then I read it, and it was an unbelievable execution. As you all know, here at the Moonlit Library, we love our special editions. Well, I love my special editions. My spouse tolerates it. And of course, I have a special edition for the Gilded Blood series, because Rachel Rener is a beast who put together one of the coolest Kickstarter campaigns I'd ever seen to create an omnibus for the Gilded Blood series. And I do, of course, have it to show y'all. So this is our Gilded Blood omnibus. So that's our slipcover. And now we're going to see the horrifying way that I get it out. Big shimmy, big shimmy. This is our omnibus. Look how pretty it is. And just in case you wondered, yes, that is iridescent foiling on the edges and the cover itself. I love this omnibus with every fiber of my being because it is beautiful. It has a gorgeous, like, velveteen, soft cover, almost, in an ungodly pink, as you can see. It also has unbelievable end papers. Yeah, that's our romantasy world of the Fae territory. Has absolutely gorgeous little fun designs on each of the chapters, and even, like, slipped within the chapters. Look at that, that's so pretty! And then, just for shits and giggles, because pretty everything else wasn't enough, Rachel slid in these absolutely beautiful artworks. If I remember correctly, there are 113 of them across all 4 books. And if you, like me, are hesitant about omnibuses because they get big, like, this is a large book. She worked so hard to make sure that it kind of lay flat so that there weren't difficulties. So if you look at it, that lays pretty much dead flat. And there is, of course, a ribbon, because of course there is, so that you can track where you are. There is also a gold edition. So all of the iridescent features that you saw on my copy, because I'm a magpie who needs pretty, sparkly, shiny things, are gild instead. So there are gold edges. The jungle bird, Biscuit himself, is gold, and the butt cobra is also gold. This edition is actually still available for pre-order, even though the Kickstarter funded and launched. You can still order either my magpie iridescent version or the super classy Gilded Blood version with the gold edges through Rachel's website, which is rachelrener.com, linked in caption, and get your own copy as well, if you just fall in love with this story the way that I did. So now that we've sort of introduced you to it, we are going to go live from the study for our synopsis, our acknowledgements, our content warnings, and our first 3 chapter reads. I fully expected Zayn to yell at me when he returned to the shop. What I didn't expect was the fresh cobra tattoo on my client's butt magically springing to life, or the interdimensional filing cabinet hiding in the back of Zayn's office. And oh, did I mention that my gorgeous magic ink hoarding boss is actually an incubus? Now, through mostly no fault of my own, we have to venture into a strange and distant land, where a never-ending list of lethal flora, fauna, and foe await us. When you add in my Jewish mother's string of poorly timed, hysterical phone calls, there is one thing I'm grateful for. There's no cell service in the Fae realm. Okay. That's the synopsis that sucked me in off that Facebook sponsored ad. And I have no regrets. And hopefully neither will you, because everything in this story lives up to that synopsis, from start to finish. Beyond that, I don't know about you, but the phrase, a never-ending list of lethal flora, fauna, and fae await us, Sounds a little bit like Australia, right? And there I go. I just lost like every Australian who has ever listened to me. Sorry, guys. Australia is beautiful, I'm sure. So now we are going to dive right on in to our acknowledgements and our trigger warnings. To love a person is to see all of their magic and to remind them of it when they have forgotten. Although our trigger warnings for this particular book are not as intense as some of our past books, I do want to acknowledge them. The trigger warnings for Inked are themes of bodily autonomy and lack thereof are explored throughout this book. There is a lot that goes on regarding that particular topic and one's freedom and agentic choice in their life and their ability to be their own person and to be free of control by somebody else. While this is done within the context of the Gilded Blood series in a really fun and beautiful way, it can take a bit of a toll if that is something that you yourself have experienced. So please be conscious of this particular trigger and feel free to step away if things get overwhelming. Although the first 3 chapters aren't really that problematic when it comes to that particular topic. So now, let's go into our Smutty Storytime. Chapter 1. Butt Cobras. The rotund, dimpled butt cheek jerked and wriggled beneath my fingers, eliciting an exasperated sigh from me, the stalwart curator of said derriere. It belonged to a squirming 50-something-year-old gentleman whose leather motorcycle chaps had been bunched up just beneath the crease of his glutes so that I, his illustrious tattoo artist, could add a rattle to the tip of the cobra's tail, which started at the top of his shoulders and ended right there on his exposed bottom. Yes, I realize cobras don't have rattles. And no, it wasn't my idea. Apparently, my original snake design, which boasted kick-ass glowing red eyes and 3-inch long venom-dripping fangs, wasn't intimidating enough. Hence, the ill-advised conception of the rattlesnake cobra abomination. Hey, the customer's always right. Or so I'm told. As the burly man quivering beneath my electric needle let out another pitiful whimper, I was forced to look up from the impeccable line I was pulling. You doing okay over there, Roy? Uh-huh. His arms were wrapped around the chair he was straddling as though he were clinging to a life raft. Doing great. Okay, so, the good news, I regarded the empty plastic container on the stand beside me, is that we're like 98% finished. The bad news is I just ran out of brown ink. Why don't you take a breather while I head to the back and grab some more? His eyes rolled backward as he sank face first into the vinyl pad he was smothering. Thank you, sweet baby Jesus. Talia is fine, I quipped. He snorted into his seat. You know, I meant to tell you yesterday that I got a nephew about your age, just turned 25. He's funny like you, and a good looker too. Kid's got tattoo sleeves from his jaw to his wrists, just like his uncle. I coughed to try to conceal my laughter. My mother would have a conniption fit if I brought home another Gentile with a neck tattoo. So unless your nephew's last name is Lipschitz, Gentile, that's some kind of lizard? Depends on the Gentile, I grinned. I set down my tattoo gun and peeled off my gloves, stretching my fingers as I did. Apart from Roy, the shop was totally empty this afternoon. He'd sent his biker buddies over to the dive bar next door once it came time for me to shave his right butt cheek, one of the many perks of my day job, and Zayn, my boss, hadn't shown up to work this morning. Chewing on the inside of my cheek as I trudged to the back room, I glanced down at my phone's empty screen for the 100th time that day. It wasn't like Zayn to go AWOL. In fact, he'd only ever missed a single day of work since hiring me 2 years ago, and even then, he'd been bombarding me with non-stop texts the entire morning. Is the register locked? Do you have enough singles in the drawer? You're not doing tequila shots with customers again, right? I pulled up his contact information in my phone, feeling my stomach do a little flip as it always did when his stupidly gorgeous photo appeared on the screen. The man drove me crazy with all of his neuroticisms. Sort of reminded me of my mother in that respect now that I thought about it, but hot damn did he have a beautiful face. Wavy black hair, high cheekbones, a year-round dewy glow that made me suspect he visited tanning beds on his extended lunch breaks, and those eyes. They were like polished emeralds, sometimes dark, sometimes gleaming, depending on the light and his ever-changing moods. They made my own green eyes look like a mucky swamp. My thumb hit the call button as my free hand rummaged through the cabinet, looking for number 17, Dulce de Leche Brown. Maybe he just slept in, I told myself as the first ring trilled in my ear. I mean, even workaholics gotta have benders from time to time. Except Zayn didn't drink, or party, or indulge in so much as a single Reese's Piece, lest his perfect six-pack be chipped away by a morsel of smooth peanut buttery goodness. The line rang and rang. Meanwhile, that stupid shade of brown was nowhere to be found. "You've reached Zayn," a deep husky voice finally answered. "Don't leave a message." "Because you never check your voicemails," I finished, having heard that same greeting 12 times that morning. Yeah. I slammed the phone on the counter, only semi-concerned about the replacement screen I'd just gotten for, repeatedly slamming my phone on hard surfaces. Telephonic devices don't last particularly long in my custody. "Hey, Tal, what's the holdup? I gotta pee," Roy hollered from the other room. "Don't you dare pull your pants up," I yelled. "They're not sterile." "Fine, but I got maybe 10 minutes before my bladder explodes." Okay, I'm coming. We're almost done. Just hang tight." He gave an annoyed grunt in response. Crap. My hands raked through the scattered ink bottles on the counter. I'd dumped out the entire cabinet, but there was nothing. Not even a darker brown I could blend with white. I rubbed the bridge of my nose in aggravation. Running out of ink 9/10 of the way through a 5-hour session was such a rookie move. My cheek chewing intensified further as I eyed Zayn's locked office door. I knew he had an entire stash of expensive exotic ink in there that I was strictly forbidden to touch. Zayn himself only used it for special VIP clients who paid him something outrageous to engrave these weird-looking symbols all over their body. I'd asked him about them once, both the clients and the elaborate squiggles, and his answer had been clear. None of my damn business. "There's an empty water bottle out here. Can I use that?" Roy hollered. "For drinking?" "No." "No, you cannot use that," I shrieked, thinking of the beautiful bedazzled thermos my mother had gotten me last Hanukkah. "Just hang on, I'm coming." Without another thought, I snatched an expired credit card from my wallet and jammed it between Zayn's locked office door and the frame, expertly jimmying the handle as I made a sawing motion with the card. When the lock finally caught, I swung the door open triumphantly. Zayn's office was cast in darkness, but I didn't bother turning on a light as I made my way to the metal filing cabinet behind his desk, where one of the cool symbols he was always doodling had been etched into the metal. By some miraculous turn of events, the top drawer was unlocked and slightly ajar, displaying a beautiful cache of tiny glass bottles clustered at the bottom, just waiting to be injected into someone's butt. I flicked on my cell phone flashlight as I rummaged through Zayn's clinking treasures like the amateur burglar I was, my fingertips brushing over the fancy labels until I found the one I needed. A light brown pigment aptly called Fawn. The name was hand-painted in fancy calligraphy with grand flourishes on the F and N. "Are these seriously stoppered with corks?" I marveled, rolling the bottle in between my thumb and forefinger. How weird. I could practically hear Zayn chastising me. "Tal, you'd better put that the hell back and walk away. A year's worth of paychecks wouldn't cover the cost of that one bottle. I'll just use a tiny bit. I silently promised my conspicuously absent boss, clutching the itty-bitty vial in my hand. With a fleeting twinge of guilt, I shut the door and made my way back to the hairy full moon my customer was casually burying in the lobby. Sorry, I breezed as I slipped on fresh gloves and carefully refilled the ink chamber, making sure to be as stingy as humanly possible. I'll just have you inked and saran wrapped before you know it. Just don't jerk around this time. Roy let out an unintelligible grunt as I used a mag needle to whip shade across the rattle on his rump, switching off between blotting and filling in the shading as quickly as possible. The ink was smooth and creamy, its pigment vibrant and vivid despite being a yucky brown shade. Ignoring his persistent griping and fidgeting, I smeared some ointment on the new lines, then quickly swapped in the 5R liner to resculpt the old number 17 dulce de leche lines running across the snake's belly, marveling at the quality. Zayn had been right to hoard this stuff. I jumped up from my chair as a brilliant idea struck me. Be right back! A moment later, I returned with 2 more bottles from Zayn's stash, Onyx and Ruby. After cleaning out the ink cartridge with distilled water, I quickly touched up the rest of my creation, awed by the ease in which the black ink spread across Roy's skin, with perfect coverage, making the scales of the snake pop and whisper as though brushing past one another as it slithered. Meanwhile, the red ink had the perfect viscosity for meticulous precision, allowing me to pack color into those wicked crimson eyes with unbelievable depth and emotion. Yes, I hissed, hunched over my brilliant work like a mad scientist. How's it look? Roy asked, squinting at me over his shoulder to examine the progress of his Frankensnake. Terrifying, I grinned. He looks like he might leap right off your back and bite me. As I wiped away the excess ink and cleaned the tattoo site, I had to take a minute to admire my artistic prowess. I mean, sure, it was a stupid cobra with a rattle, but in terms of quality, it was one of my better creations. The scales were slick and black, gleaming like oil beneath the fluorescent lights. The eyes were narrowed and lively, crimson danger seething behind slanted irises. And the rattle was so realistic it was practically quivering. In fact, the lights on the ceiling must have flickered, because for a second there, it really did look like it was moving. Or maybe that was just Roy twitching from a raw butt and a full bladder. After snapping a quick photo for my portfolio, minus his butt crack for the sake of the children, I quickly cleaned and reapplied a layer of tattoo ointment to all 5 feet of snake, then held up a mirror for Roy to admire the work of art on his backside. It's perfect, he grinned, taking it in from fang to rattle. My wife's gonna love it. Yep, Dottie's a lucky lady, I chuckled, deftly pressing a sheet of adhesive tattoo film to his posterior before helping him pull up his pants. Without bothering to refasten his belt, he half ran, half waddled to the bathroom, letting out a prolonged moan of relief that I could hear through the door the moment it clicked shut. After taking one more glance at my phone, no missed calls except the usual 3 or 4 from my mother, I got to work cleaning up my station. Gloves, leftover ink, and ink cups went in the trash. Used needles were placed in the biohazard bin, metal stand was cleaned and disinfected with Maticide, and hands were thoroughly washed with surgical-grade soap. I'd just started cleaning off my tattoo machine when another moan sounded from the bathroom, this one heartier than the last. Jesus, Roy, I muttered, shaking my head in disgust. Turn on the damn fan. The shrill, blood-curdling scream that followed made me jump half a foot in the air. Roy? I shouted. My half-cleaned tattoo gun clattered on the stand as I tore across the shop. Roy, what's wrong? Help! Get it off! Roy! I jiggled the handle, then banged on the door with my fist. Unlock the door! Roy! Help me! He yelped. Please! Ah! His voice cut off with a loud, choking sound. Something heavy thudded against the floor, followed by skin-prickling silence. Roy? I shouted, kicking the door. Roy! No response. I yanked out my cell and dialed 911, cradling the phone between my ear and shoulder as the line rang. Then I snatched up the same credit card I'd used to break into Zayn's office and forced it into the door jamb, jiggering the handle violently. 911, what's your emergency? A female voice answered. Hi, how are you? In the beat of silence that ensued, an unwelcome memory of the first time I'd called 911 flashed through my mind. I was 18 years old and had just gotten home after my last day of high school, excited for that one and only parent-sanctioned shot of tequila my dad had promised me if I got through my final exams. I burst into the kitchen to find him passed out on the kitchen floor. It was the first of several times I'd find him like that, though the cancer diagnosis wouldn't come for a few more years. Ma'am, what is your emergency? Grimacing, I roughly shook the memory away. I think my customer is having a heart attack, I grunted, using my shoulder to push against the door as I jimmied the lock. The credit card caught, then slipped past. Damn it, I yelled, come on! I could hear the woman clattering information into her keyboard. Ma'am, I need you to calm down. What's your name and location? Talia. Talia Keistenbaum. I work at Flourish and Dots Tattoo Parlor in Wynwood, Miami. I added for good measure, yanking down the handle just as the card caught the edge of the latch. Yes! I shoved against the door, but it only budged a few inches. Roy's body was blocking it from opening any further. Damn it, Roy! I wheezed, pushing on the door with both hands. No luck. Please tell me exactly what's happening, Talia. The dispatcher was prompting me. I pressed my back against the door and heaved with my legs, which slid uselessly across the linoleum tile. My client had to pee, so he went to use the toilet, I groaned. Single stall. The door still wouldn't budge, so I started doing backward thrusts with my hips, pounding my ass into the door, battering ram style. Few, thump. Minutes, thump. Later, thump, thump. He started screaming, thump, thump, thump. Damn it! But throbbing, I sank to the ground. And then what happened? Then he, I don't know, fell, I guess? My articulate and incredibly helpful explanation petered out as I peered into the 5-inch crack between the door and the jamb. Roy's bare legs were splayed out on the ground, leather chaps bunched around his ankles. Behind him, near the toilet, something small and dark darted across the floor. What the? I whispered. Ma'am? A strange, discomforting sound was emanating from the general toilet area. A soft hiss, almost like the whisper of wind. A gas leak? I wondered idly, but I couldn't smell anything. I turned my ear toward the crack, holding my breath to listen. There was another weird sound on top of that, an intermittent shaking sound that reminded me of a maraca, one that was being rattled at 1,000,000 times per second by an angry, tight-fisted mariachi player, which of course didn't make any... Ma'am, please, do you know if your client is breathing? I'm trying to find out, I snapped, craning my neck to try to get a better look inside. A movement just behind Roy's legs made me jump and smack my head on the door jamb. Ow! What the... I started, then abruptly choked on my own question as a flat head rose up from the tiled floor. At the end of its long, black, serpentine body, a fawn-colored rattle quivered, a spine-chilling warning that made every hair on my body stand on end, and my throat seal shut, much like the last time I'd eaten a strawberry, only to realize that I am deathly allergic to them. Somehow I didn't think an EpiPen was going to save me this time. That's not possible, I tried to say. Instead, an unintelligible strangled noise croaked out of my fluttering mouth. The cobra's head bobbed from side to side, its red eyes boring into the depths of my soul. Talia, officers are currently on the way, but I need you to provide me with additional information in the meantime. What is the victim's name and age? Is he conscious? I stammered. With a hiss that sliced through the air like a whip, the creature's jaw unhinged to reveal the largest, sharpest fangs I'd ever seen, and a forked tongue darting in and out between them. It pulled its head back as though rearing to strike. Snake! I screamed. Wait, did you just say? There's a giant-ass snake in the bathroom! I shrieked into the receiver. It's... oh shit! My cell phone clattered to the floor as the black serpent rose up from the ground, its 3-inch-long fangs dripping with venom and malice, and its brown rattle shaking menacingly. Before I could choke out another 4-letter word, the snake lunged. A high-pitched little girl scream tore from my throat. In a fit of panic, I toppled backward, smacking my head on the tile with a terrible thwack that immediately blotted the fluorescent ceiling lights into inky black darkness. Chapter 2: The Jewish Mother Zone. BP is 119/75, a man's voice was saying from somewhere above. No signs of external injuries. A blinding white light shone into my left eye, and then the right. Pupils look good. Zayn? I mumbled. Nope, my name is Nick, the voice replied. You fell and hit your head. Can you squeeze my fingers for me? Did I lose a lot of blood? I murmured. None at all, as far as I can tell. Oh, thank God. I squinted, one eye open, and then the next. A decently attractive, red-headed guy was kneeling over me, holding my hand in both of his. Did you just propose? I asked, wincing as I tried to hoist myself up on an elbow, because I generally prefer dinner and a movie first. Like most good-looking men, Nick rolled his eyes and ignored my comment. Squeeze my fingers, please. Good. Can you wiggle your toes? I nodded. He patted my freshly de-sneakered foot, then arched an eyebrow. Out of curiosity, why were you asking about blood loss? Crazy rare blood type, all transfusions are a major no-no, I muttered as I looked around the room, trying to remember where I was. When my eyes landed on the wide purple wall sporting hundreds of Polaroid photos of fresh tattoos, it dawned on me that I was at work. But unlike most Tuesday afternoons, various men and women in police uniforms were shuffling around the tattoo parlor, including a pair of burly dudes from animal control. Roy! I gasped, sitting bolt upright. Where is he? Is he okay? My eyes widened as the events from earlier that afternoon came careening back. There was a snake, I cried, gripping Nick's arm. He gently leaned me back against the wall. A female officer who had been standing a few feet away turned her attention on me. Wait, so you also confirmed there was a snake? I nodded meekly. She pulled a notebook from her breast pocket to jot something inside. We didn't see any evidence of one, but the guy on the stretcher kept insisting there was one in the bathroom. My head whipped to the front of the store where all of the blinds had been opened to provide a clear view of Roy being carried into an ambulance outside. Head bandaged, he was sitting bolt upright on the stretcher, gesticulating wildly as he shouted at the 3 EMTs who were straining to lift him into their vehicle. He did have 2 long scratches on his backside, Nick remarked. That might be where a hypothetical snake could have grazed him. He pulled a radio from his pocket and spoke into it. Hey Jen, put a pressure immobilization bandage on that scratch on his left glute. He may need a round of anti-venom at the hospital. Wait, is he okay? I tried to scramble to my feet, but Nick's surprisingly firm hand held my flailing shoulder down. What the hell happened? The police officer knelt beside me, a touch of sympathy softening her otherwise stern expression. It's Talia, right? My name is Officer Wilcox from Miami PD. From what we can gather from your customer's intoxicated explanation, there was a snake in the toilet. When he saw it, he passed out, hitting his head on the sink. Intoxicated? I frowned. Roy knows better than to drink before getting a tattoo. He's fine, Nick quickly added. Just a mild concussion and those shallow lacerations on his backside. We've already notified his wife that we're taking him to the hospital. By the way, how many fingers am I holding up? 4. I watched Roy's ambulance depart in a blue and red flurry of sirens, feeling my stomach sink. What do you mean there was a snake in the toilet? Did you catch it? My eyes trailed to the 2 gentlemen standing beside a rather large kennel. Officer Wilcox shook her head. As I was saying, there was no sign of a snake when we arrived. And when was that? I blustered, feeling increasingly belligerent. About 6 minutes ago. My mouth dangled open. How long had I been out? Wilcox shrugged a padded shoulder. Most likely, Roy flushed the snake back down the toilet just before passing out. I'd like to tell you this is an anomaly, but here in Miami, you'd be surprised. That said, we'd be happy to have animal control search the rest of your shop to be safe. Are you the owner? No, I replied, massaging the growing bump on the back of my head. He didn't show up today. my eyebrows stitched together as my full width slowly started to return. That snake wasn't in the toilet, it had been on the ground. And since when did cobras live in Miami? Because that's definitely what that snake was, right? Flat head, flared hood on the sides. I mean, I would know since I'd literally just drawn one that was pretty much identical to the cobra that tried to kill Roy in the bathroom. A lump the size of a tennis ball reappeared in my throat. Could you please provide me with the owner's name and contact information? Wilcox asked, pen poised above her notebook. I struggled to my feet, my head spinning as I did. Nick took my elbow and gently helped me up. I mean, I'd be glad to, but he hasn't picked up his phone all day. I'm actually worried something might have happened to him. Wilcox's own eyebrows furrowed as she scribbled another note in her pad. How long has he been missing? Since last night. She let out a hearty laugh. Okay, well, give us a call if he doesn't show up in another 48 hours. In the meantime, with your permission, we'll do a quick sweep of the place and then be on our way. I started. Yes? I chewed on my lip, acutely aware of how ridiculous I was about to sound. I'm not a Florida native, so forgive me if this is a stupid question, but are there cobras in Miami? Officer Wilcox raised an eyebrow. Not legally, no, but just ask Hank and Russ. She gestured to the gentlemen from Animal Control who were currently shining flashlights into every nook and cranny of the shop. People smuggle in all types of animals from overseas. She turned to leave, but another one of my inquisitive squeaks stopped her. Sorry, but these cobras that people smuggle in, are any of them jet black with like, rattles on their tails? Rattles? You know, like a rattlesnake, but on a cobra, with glowing red eyes. Officer Wilcox and Nick exchanged raised eyebrows. Not that I've ever seen, she replied carefully. Nick? His mouth pinched into a thin line as though he were suppressing a laugh, or a snarky remark. But because he was a nice person, he just replied, No, ma'am. I've never seen a Floridian cobra with a rattle and glowing red eyes. But who knows? Maybe they have 'em in South Beach. Yep. They both thought I was a complete wackadoodle. Do you want us to escort you to the hospital? Nick casually asked as he packed up his medical equipment. Your vitals look good, but I'd be happy to take you in as a precaution. I'm fine. He didn't look remotely convinced. In fact, once Officer Wilcox had excused herself to join the rest of the snake hunt, he pitched his voice lower. Not trying to offend you or anything, but were you or your customer partaking in any, recreational activities before we arrived? I frowned, seriously considering his question. No, not that I know of. Just checking. He smiled, gathering the last of his things. You never know in Miami. As he turned to leave, I suddenly remembered something. Hey, please make sure Roy keeps that tattoo covered and clean at the hospital. That bathroom floor isn't exactly sterile. What tattoo? The massive snake tattoo that covers his entire backside? Nick was staring at me as though a polka-dotted unicorn horn had sprouted between my eyebrows. There was no tattoo on that man's back, he finally answered, frowning deeply. His eyes crept back to where Officer Wilcox was standing as though he really did think I was on drugs. Hey, Wilcox, maybe you'd better come back. I'm joking! I blurted out, a borderline maniacal laugh slipping through my lips. Just your typical tattooist humor. I'll get out of everyone's way. I forced a plastic smile on my face to accentuate my perfectly sane demeanor. What with the missing reptile hunt and all of that, thanks for, yeah. With that, I spun on my heels and fled to the unoccupied back room, cheeks flushing hotter than a shot of cinnamon whiskey, while Nick's dubious expression burned a hole into the back of my head. The officers stayed for another 20 minutes or so, searching the place for snakes, though by that point, I was fairly certain they were looking for the hallucinogenic drugs Roy and I must have been partaking in. Luckily, they found neither, and so they bid me good day after I refused them entrance into Zayn's office, and they refused me information about which hospital Roy was carted to, even after I'd lied about being his niece. I guess they didn't see the resemblance. Once all of the police cars had scattered, I made one more anxious lap to check for stray cobras, then flipped the sign on the front door to closed. With a huff of determination, I burst into my boss's office, squaring my shoulders in an attempt to feign bravery. The filing cabinet of exotic ink was still unlocked, its open drawer beckoning to me. Okay, Talia, let's work through this logically, I said aloud to myself as any sane, not crazy person would do. You just spent, what, 5 hours tattooing a custom designed imaginary cobra slash rattlesnake onto a man's back, just as you've done 6 days a week for the last 2 years and 4 months. I flicked on the fluorescent ceiling light, scanning the floor for stray, not so imaginary serpents as I made my way to the cabinet. As far as you know, you have not done drugs, unless that ink had some sort of weird inhalant, which would be a really bizarre thing for Zayn to have in his possession. I peered into the drawer, which must have had 100 bottles of ink, all perfectly arranged by color and hue, from white to black and every color in between. After triple checking the area for snakes, I pulled the ink bottles out of the drawer, one by one, assembling them on Zane's immaculately clean desk so I could sit in his leather chair and examine them. Picking the nearest one up, a bright pinkish-orange color, I brought it to my nose to carefully inspect its label. Except there was nothing to inspect. What the hell? I muttered, turning the bottle over in my hand. Apart from the elegant script that read Daylily, its label was otherwise blank. Where was the ingredient list? The expiration date, the company information, the safety warning? I picked up the next bottle, Hyacinth, and the next one, Peacock. Nothing. No info, no instructions, no... Wait a minute. I held Peacock up to the light, squinting at its contents. As I twirled the bottle from side to side, the ink inside shimmered like the iridescent surface of a bubble. Royal blue, emerald green, and deep purple all swirled inside the glass like an actual peacock feather glinting in the sunlight. Eyes bulging, I yanked the stopper off and peered inside. How is that even possible? I asked no one in particular. Tattoo ink isn't iridescent. It's not like you can just stuff multiple colors in a single bottle. I snatched another vial from the desk, opal, and nearly choked when I yanked out the cork. Its contents were pearly white and opalescent, with flecks of every color of the rainbow twinkling beneath the harsh fluorescent light of Zane's office. What the hell is this stuff? I leaned back in my stolen chair, taking in the assortment of pigments displayed on the desk. Some were metallic, others looked like literal gemstones. One, aptly named Galaxy, glittered like thousands of twinkling stars, and another one of them, Spectral, had every color I'd ever seen in my life packed into one bottle, including a purplish but not quite purple color I was fairly certain was not an actual color. Part of me started to wonder if I'd made some sort of terrible mistake, thinking these strange dyes were for human skin. But they are. I shook my head vigorously, then winced at the throbbing ache it brought on. I'd seen Zayn use them with my own eyes, just last month, in fact, when I'd been forced to stay late rebalancing the cash sheet after the register was off by $80. I may or may not have given someone change for $100 instead of a 20. One of his strange-looking late-night clients came in. A tall, athletic-looking chick with overly bronzed skin the color of glittering honey, and hair so green it looked like sour apple candy. She stuck up her nose when I greeted her, and went straight to Zane's chair, where he wordlessly etched those strange symbols across her shoulder blades, using the ink from these very bottles. Ah! I nearly toppled off my chair as the phone in my pocket buzzed. Snatching it from my jeans like a hot potato, I couldn't help but be disappointed when I saw it wasn't Zayn. After fumbling to hit the green button on my cracked screen, again, When did that happen? My mother's shrill, New York-tinged voice filled the empty office before I even had time to say hello. I have been trying to reach you all day. Why are you yelling? I shouted back, yanking the phone away from my ear to adjust the volume to the bare minimum, just like I always had to do when she called. I'm not yelling, that's just how I talk. Okay, fine, but why are you calling me right now? You know I'm at work. Still? Why does that horrible man work you like a pack mule? I set the phone on the desk, not bothering to put it on speaker, since I could hear her just fine, even with the volume turned all the way down. First of all, Zayn isn't horrible. He's not even here. And second of all, it's 3:30 in the afternoon. Well, if he's not there, why should you be? I rolled my eyes. Why have you been blowing up my phone all day? Did someone die? Oi, continue. Bite your tongue. Of course no one died. There's no one left to die but me, and if I were dead, I wouldn't be calling you, would I? I rubbed the growing ache in my forehead with my palm. Ma, are you coming over for dinner tonight or not? I'm making chicken parmesan, your favorite. Ma, I already told you, I can't come to dinner tonight, I replied, absent-mindedly twirling a galaxy in my fingers while simultaneously trying to figure out how the heck someone could make the indigo/black ink sparkle like that. It's not like you can just inject glittery microplastic under someone's skin. Well, not safely or legally, at least. I sighed in frustration. And I can't eat chicken parmesan anyway. I'm lactose intolerant. What are you talking about? Chicken parmesan doesn't have lactose in it. Releasing my grip on the ink, I pressed my forehead to the cool, smooth wood of Zayn's mahogany desk and stifled a groan. Mother, go to your computer, pull up Google, type in Parmesan cheese and lactose, and see what comes up. You know I don't know how to use that fakakta Google. Okay, Mom, look, forget the Parmesan. I took a deep breath, trying to make sense of a day that frankly reminded me of the time I ate 2 of my ex-boyfriend's special brownies without asking him first. It was the only other time in my life I'd been seeing things that may or may not have been real, which, for whatever reason, gave me an absolutely insane idea. Listen, I have a serious question to ask you. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Are you finally dating someone? Has he proposed? What? No! Oi! How could you not tell me you were dating someone? What's his name? Ma! I shouted. I'm not dating anyone. Are you at least pregnant? If the father's Jewish, I won't be mad. Ma! I sighed, peeling my forehead off of Zayn's desk to lean back in his chair. Look, I just wanted to ask you. Even though I'm a grown-ass woman, how angry you would be on a scale of 1 to homicide if I trailed off, tugging on the gold locket I always wore around my neck, an anxious habit I developed years ago when my dad was first diagnosed with cancer. How angry would I be if you what? If I got a tattoo, okay? Not a big one or anything. I quickly added, warily regarding the long line of vials stretching before me. Just like a little tiny one that's super inconspicuous, hardly noticeable. Itty-bitty. I was shocked she actually let me get the whole sentence out without interrupting. In fact, the line had gone silent for so long I checked to see if the call had dropped. Mom? I asked, bringing the phone back to my ear. You there? Oh my God! She wailed, nearly causing me to drop it again. I gingerly nudged the cell phone far away to the far corner of the desk while her shrill lamentations broadcasted throughout the entire room. I knew it! I knew working at that place would turn you into a Hell's Angel. God made your body a temple, and now you want to go and desecrate it? You're supposed to leave this world as you entered it, in one piece and unblemished, like a rental car, not covered in cheap bumper stickers like some used Volkswagen. As she carried on, I traced small circles on the desk with my finger, not even bothering to interject. She was deep in what I liked to call the Jewish Mother Zone, or JMZ for short, a hysterical state where she became untethered from the natural world, unmindful of all other stimuli and life forms, and as undeterred as a wild snowball careening down Mount Everest, who goes around graffitiing rental cars before returning them. Did your new boyfriend put you up to this, Michigas? Ma, for the 1000th time, I don't have a boyfriend. Oi, you really are Meshuggah. First you move 20 miles away from home, then you dye your beautiful hair to look like a fire hydrant. Fire hydrants aren't burgundy, I muttered, fingering my ponytail. At some schlocky tattoo parlor in the worst part of town. The art district is the worst part of town? And now you want to get gang sleeves like the Bloods and Crips. What happened to your supposed needle phobia that I used to hear so much about? Oh God, she moaned. I don't know how much more of this my heart can take. Dr. File already told me that a drop, Talia, of added stress could make my heart explode like a microwaved egg. Knuckling my forehead, I stifled a groan. If I didn't nip this diatribe in the bud, it would last through midnight. It was time for evasive maneuvers. What? I suddenly yelled into the empty shop. Oh, sure, yeah, I'll be right there. Well, if you're bleeding that badly, you gotta apply pressure to the wound, I added for good measure as I brought my phone back to my ear. Aw, shoot, Mom. A customer just walked in and he's severely hemorrhaging. What? Anyway, love you more than life itself. Gotta go, bye! I said that last part in a single rambling crescendo, then hurriedly switched off the phone before she could launch into a bonus features, director's cut, conniption fit. After another long sigh, aimed more at my current situation than at my Fruit Loops mother, I reached for an ink bottle labeled Platinum, whose silvery contents were shimmering like liquid metal. There's only one way to test all of this, I murmured, eyeing the ring finger of my right hand. My clients had always teased me for being the only tattoo artist in the world with 0 tattoos. Well, this would shut them up and prove I wasn't crazy. Probably. And sure, I'd have to wear a glove around my mother for the rest of my life, or at least the rest of her life. But if Harley Quinn could do it, so could I. With a determined huff, I snatched 2 more vials from the desk and made my way to the front of the shop. Either this was going to work, thereby proving my sanity, or I would call Nick back and ask him to personally escort me to the nearest mental institution. A comforting thought, really, since asylums usually have guards, and that meant my mother couldn't follow me inside and strangle me to death for what I was about to do. Chapter 3. A Snake in the Glass. I stared at the tattoo gun I was clenching in my left hand, its ominous 3RL needle gleaming in the light like the cursed spindle in Sleeping Beauty. My hand was shaking like crazy, partially due to the fact that I'm most definitely not left-handed. No way was I going to tattoo a diamond ring on my wedding finger. But, as my mother so astutely pointed out, the primary reason for my uncontrollable trembling was that I'm actually terrified of needles. The ones that are aimed at my body, at least. That's why Zayn had been amazing enough to outfit our shop with brand new pocket-sized wireless rotary tattoo machines that most clients mistook for hardy vape pens. The design honestly made me forget I was clutching a needle in my hand, until, of course, the scary pointy bit was directed straight at me. Bordering on hyperventilation, I sucked in one deep breath after another, trying to calm myself down. Despite the AC being set to its highest subarctic setting, beads of sweat kept appearing above my brow, and the salt was making my eyes sting no matter how furiously I tried to shake the droplets away. Top it all off with the forthcoming dramatic reappearance of the bowl of Lucky Charms and almond milk I'd eaten that morning, and my brilliant plan suddenly didn't feel so brilliant anymore. Setting the gun beside the 3 unopened vials of ink, I removed my nitrile glove to rub the bridge of my nose. A few minutes ago, my idea of etching a multi-carat diamond and platinum ring onto my finger to test the magic ink that I was fairly certain had brought Roy's tattoo to life had seemed brilliant. If I was wrong, I'd just end up with a permanent ring on my right hand that would be easily concealable. If I was right, I would have a lavish piece of jewelry that I could auction off to gift myself a McLaren 720S in Movine Blue, while still having leftover cash to undergo emergency tattoo removal before the high holidays. However, after putting a little more thought into it, specifically the thought of my mother's heart exploding like a microwaved egg, as she so vividly put it, Paired with an acute case of trypanophobia, I was beginning to have my doubts. I mean, assuming I wasn't inadvertently high on drugs or in a coma, I had just witnessed a man get attacked by his own butt cobra. Probably better to play it safe than bitten. 2 minutes later, with a freshly sharpened number 2 pencil in hand, I pulled a blank piece of paper from Zayn's printer and sketched out an image of a diamond ring with sharp lines and cute little flowers embedded in the band, much like the engagement ring I'd one day drop nonchalant hints about if I ever managed to nab myself a serious boyfriend. After outlining it in black ink and erasing the pencil marks, I retrieved a purple, green, and blue feathered quill from Zayn's top drawer, which I anxiously hovered over an uncorked vial of ink called diamond dust. Aptly named, the glass clear pigment actually threw rainbows onto the walls when I twirled it in the light. With a deep breath and a mostly steady hand, I dipped the quill into the ink and began filling in the gemstone on my sketch, admiring how each facet glinted and sparkled as though three-dimensional. Once I was finished, I recorked diamond dust and uncorked platinum, coloring in the band and its delicate etchings while adding highlights and shadows with snow and onyx, the same black ink I'd used on Roy's tattoo. After 30 minutes of filling, shading, and wiping drops of stress sweat from my brow, I held up my finished creation in front of me, marveling at the realism. The platinum band glinted like buffed, shining metal. The diamond glittered and flashed like a real $1,000,000 stone, and the floral decorations engraved along the band looked so real, I half expected there to be smooth bumps and edges as I ran my finger across them. It was so realistic looking, I was honestly waiting for the ring to tumble off the page and into my outstretched, greedy palm. Except nothing happened. The fancy grandfather clock that I'd helped Zayn schlep into his office last year ticked and talked from the back corner, as though tisking my silliness with every passing second. Determined, nevertheless, I carefully set the paper back on the desk and smoothed out the edges, willing it, envisioning it, as my therapist often said, to be real. My jaw locked and my eyebrows creased with concentration as I stared at my magnificent ink creation. 10 minutes went by, and then 20. By the time the clock struck 4:30, and the noise of the gong nearly startled me out of my seat, I was starting to feel pretty foolish. Tattoos don't just come to life, I chided myself, cheeks burning with embarrassment, but snakes really do pop out of toilets. From time to time, at least. Plus, I never actually saw Roy's supposedly empty backside after passing out. Nick merely asserted that my client didn't have a tattoo there, which could have been a mistake, or a dumb joke, or hell, maybe he was the one on drugs. After all, this was Miami. I nodded resolutely. Roy's tattoo was still on his back, just like the hundreds of other tattoos I'd designed for people over the years. A random snake crawled out of the toilet and freaked us both out, because that's just what happens in Florida. And the only reason I'd mistaken it for some imaginary cobra rattlesnake monstrosity is because I'd been staring at my own creation for 5 hours straight, thereby subconsciously influencing the panic-related delusions I'd obviously been suffering from. Yep, I said out loud as I recorked the ink pots I'd been using and carefully began transporting them back to Zayn's drawer one by one. The simplest explanation is almost always the right one. Tomorrow Zayn will be back, and everything will be fine. Well, save for all the money he's gonna deduct from my paycheck for borrowing a few precious drops of his fancy schmancy ink. Ink that changes colors and glimmers like galaxies and gemstones, a sullen voice muttered in the back of my head. Nope! All in my mildly concussed head, I replied dismissively as I did my best to arrange the colors the way I'd found them, from snow to onyx. I didn't bother taking a closer look at the fancy vials because my mind was firmly made up. Once the bottles were just about as perfect as I could make them, I shut the drawer, grabbed my failed sketch, turned off the light, and locked Zayn's office door from the inside, letting it click shut behind me. Then I turned off all the lights in the shop, left the register drawer uncounted since Roy had never actually paid me, and walked out the front door an hour before my shift ended because no one was there to tell me not to. I whistled as I made my way to the alley where I always parked my beat-up brown Mazda, enjoying the balmy air and sunshine, even if the smell of booze and urine somewhat tainted the atmosphere. Less than 10 minutes away, my studio apartment was waiting for me, full of boxed wine, leftover brisket from Mom, and a soft, cushy bed where I could sit and binge Netflix until the wee hours of the morning. Tomorrow, Zayn would be back, and we would laugh about everything that happened today, and he'd be so relieved that I hadn't been bitten by a snake that he would forget about the ink I took without permission and instead give me a raise for my troubles. Yeah, I thought, smiling to myself as I stepped around the homeless person who was napping outside the brick alleyway. Tomorrow's gonna be a great day. Tomorrow was not a great day. After sleeping in, stumbling out of bed, throwing on a white tank top and a pair of low-rise jean shorts, and then giving myself a stupid paper cut while admiring my very two-dimensional and not real diamond ring sketch, I got in my car and sped to work, brushing my teeth one-handedly and spitting into an empty Slurpee cup like any functioning adult does while driving. After nearly squishing the aforementioned napping homeless person as I peeled into the back alley, turns out his name is Brett, and I gave him my homemade iced coffee for the trouble, I arrived at the shop 27 minutes late, only to find the door locked and lights off. "You've gotta be kidding me," I moaned. There, on the inside handle of the shop, was my stretchy hot pink bracelet, the shop key dangling from it. Pressing my face to the door, I banged on the glass with my palm. "Zayn!" I hollered. "Zayn, come on, open up!" Weirdly enough, all was dark and still inside, just like it had been yesterday morning, until something long and black scurried across the tile directly in front of the door, making me leap 3 feet backward. "What the—" My words cut off in a terrified yelp as a pair of glowing red eyes flickered open and peered at me from the darkness within. With shaking fingers, I pulled my phone from my pocket, fumbled with the cracked screen, and flipped on the flashlight. A strangled gasp lodged itself beside the knotted mass of obscenities that were jammed in my windpipe. There, coiled on the floor, barely 2 feet in front of me and clear as day, was a jet black cobra with glowing red eyes and a brown rattle, the sound of which I could faintly hear through the half-centimeter of glass, the only thing separating me from its long, curved fangs which were jutting out and poised to strike. I took a single step back, and then another. I seriously considered calling the police, or maybe animal control, or at least taking a photo to use as evidence for when they inevitably tried to lock me away on insanity charges. But when the snake reared its flattened head, all logic was left behind. I bolted, racing down the sidewalk and across the alley, straight past Brett, who was happily slurping away on my iced coffee, and into my car, which I'd conveniently forgotten to lock. I fumbled as I thrust the key in the ignition, revved the engine the moment it turned over, and hauled ass out of the graffiti-decorated alley. But not before politely returning Brett's wave, because I'm not a savage. I raced away from the art district, past the Miami Selfie Museum, and across the causeway, barely registering the assortment of people and palm trees that flew past as brief, inconvenient blurs. I was on autopilot, making my way to a cushy apartment complex located in South Beach that I'd only visited once, though that particular visit had been permanently engraved into my memory. But I wasn't going to think about that. When I finally arrived at Zayn's posh high-rise that overlooked Biscayne Bay, I pulled into the first spot I found, not bothering to check whether it was paid parking or not, and ran across the well-trimmed lawn, past the dolphin fountain, and into the marble lobby, where the snazzily uniformed doorman gave me a quizzical look. "I'm here to see Zayn Barami!" I shouted over my shoulder as I made my way to the elevators. "That's apartment 14F. Excuse me, miss." He called after me, clearly trying to decide whether or not he should try to intercept me, but it was too late. The elevator doors opened and I skidded inside on the toes of my candy apple red Converse sneakers, ramming the button for the 14th floor until my knuckle hurt. The moment the doors slid open, I flew out, arriving at 14F as a gasping, sweating, hyperventilating mess who was kicking herself for leaving her inhaler in the car. Any other day, I might have stopped to powder my nose or properly catch my breath, but given the circumstances, I skipped the preamble and went straight to banging down my boss's door. "Zayn!" I shouted. "It's Talia! Open up!" Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a faded blue symbol that had been hand-painted on the inside of the door frame, much like the geometric scribbles he tattooed on his ultra-rich, late-night clients when he wasn't obsessively doodling them on sticky notes that he left all over the place. The placement reminded me of a Jewish mezuzah, a religious decoration nailed inside the door frame to protect one's home. Not that a little blue squiggle was of any consequence to me at that particular moment. "Zayn!" I hollered, not caring who heard me so long as he did. "Come on, Zayn, answer the door!" I knocked, and called, and even rang his cell 5 or 6 times. But there was no answer. As I slumped against the outside of his door, a little green gecko scurried across the opposite wall, much like the gecko that brought about our first meeting. Just over 2 years ago, shortly after I'd dropped out of art school less than a month before graduating, turns out crippling grief does wonders to one's common sense. I followed my mom from Brooklyn to Miami. She and I were unsuccessfully sharing a 1-bedroom apartment in Edgewater, with me sleeping on the couch and both of us driving each other up the peeling wallpaper. One morning, after a particularly shrill shouting match stemming from the adorable tiny gecko that had climbed into her oatmeal, she wanted me to get rid of it, and I obviously wanted to keep it as a pet and name it George. I found myself traipsing through the neighboring district with my portfolio in hand. It was the gorgeous array of spray-painted murals and colorful street art that had drawn me to Wynwood, desperately searching for literally any kind of artsy-fartsy job that would pay me enough to rent my own place. That was when I impulsively walked into Flourish and Dots, after noticing the Help Wanted sign taped to the door, despite having no prior tattoo experience whatsoever. When the dark-haired Adonis at the front desk identified himself as the shop owner, I went completely tongue-tied, botching the impromptu interview worse than a backyard Brazilian butt lift. Miraculously, Zayn hired me as his apprentice on the spot, explaining that my bulging portfolio of drawings and art school credits were a good enough starting point, paired with the generous salary he offered, despite the fact that rookie tattoo apprentices are almost always expected to pay their mentors. I'd have been a putz to decline, needle phobia or no. Now, after more than 2 years in the tattoo industry, I truly appreciated how lucky I was to have stumbled into such an incredible opportunity, bare butts and all. I owed Zayn everything. My sweet studio apartment that was smack dab in the middle of a happening art district, my tattoo license, my financial independence. My whole lifestyle, really, was thanks to his totally misplaced faith and generosity. If it wasn't for that, I'd probably still be wandering around aimlessly, jumping from job to job, trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up. That was why I had to figure out what the hell was going on, both inside and outside the shop. A muffled voice coming from inside Zayn's apartment made my ears perk up. Pressing my ear to the painted steel, I held my breath to listen. At first, it was completely silent, as it had been before, and then, "Help!" a voice shouted. It sounded like it was coming from somewhere deep inside. "Zayn?" I gasped. "Help me!" the voice shouted again, this time more frantically. "I'm coming!" I cried, jumping to my feet. I jiggled the handle, expecting to have to play amateur cat burglar again. But to my surprise, the door swung wide open. Tentatively, I stepped inside the swankiest, most impeccably clean bachelor pad I'd ever seen, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the sparkling blue bay and distant sailboats, spotless marble floors boasting expensive-looking tapestries and exotic rugs, and ultra-modern white furniture that my clumsy ass would have ruined before brunch. It looked like something straight out of one of those posh home design magazines. "Zayn?" I called, my voice echoing against the towering white walls. "Where are you?" "Help!" I frowned. The voice sort of sounded like Zayn's, if Zayn had recently picked up a helium balloon sucking habit. "Zayn?" I repeated uncertainly, taking a tentative step toward the dramatic archway that led into the kitchen. "Is that you? What's going— Ah!" I screamed, flinging my arms over my head as a multicolored airborne blob hurtled out of the kitchen and dove straight at my face. "Help me!" the thing shouted as it sailed past me like a gay pride missile. I spun around like a top, scrubbing strands of Merlot hair from my eyes. "What the My voice trailed off as a large blue and green parrot landed on the back of the white leather couch directly in front of me, shaking out its massive iridescent wings before gracefully tucking them back into place. Long, rainbow-colored tail feathers trailed behind it, nearly sweeping the floor as its wide eyes took me in. "Help me," it whimpered, lifting a trembling claw. I stood there in shock, unable to move or speak. Not from the surprise air offensive launched by the most stunningly beautiful creature I'd ever laid eyes on, or even the fact that this parrot, not Zayn, had been the one crying for help. No, what was most shocking was that I was fairly certain I'd seen this parrot before. From its big, gold-speckled black eyes to its lustrous turquoise body and intricate feather patterns, all the way down to its impossibly colorful tail that transitioned from royal purple to crimson red, with every color of the rainbow in between. I took a cautious step forward, watching my own reflection in its large, unblinking eyes. Its head feathers ruffled and then unruffled as it took me in, no doubt sizing me up in the same way I was sizing it up. Yes, I was absolutely sure I had seen this parrot before because it was all but a photocopy image of the crowning element in the intricate tattoo sleeve that Zayn sported from his right shoulder to his wrist. One that featured a gorgeous exotic bird whose long rainbow tail curled around Zayn's muscular bicep and forearm, ending in an exquisite splash of symbols and runes, the meanings of which he never saw fit to explain. This parrot had to have been the inspiration for said tattoo, though my boss had never mentioned owning a pet bird before. And a creature like this certainly deserved to be mentioned, because it was like nothing I'd ever seen before. Some sort of hybrid between a rainbow macaw, a bird of paradise, and one of those mythical phoenixes I'd seen in that movie about the boy wizard. Already bored with my basic wine-colored head feathers, the parrot turned its own head 180 degrees to preen the teal fluff on its back. Entranced, I took another step closer, marveling at the radiance of its plumage, which shimmered like the iridescent surface of a bubble, royal blue, emerald green, and even a flash— I gulped, recognition suddenly dawning on me— of deep purple. Just like the color-changing peacock ink I'd held in my hand the night before. As the parrot inclined its head at me, understanding clicked into place. This parrot wasn't the inspiration for Zayn's tattoo. This parrot was Zayn's tattoo. So that concludes our read of the first 3 chapters of Inked. And those first 3 chapters were all it took for me to be completely absorbed into the world of the Gilded Blood series. They are engaging, they are fun, and somehow it doesn't feel heavy like a lot of urban paranormal romance or romantasies do. This just felt enjoyable, which is really, really cool and really, really novel. So conceptually, with the first 3 chapters, we start to see a system of magic be established. It takes longer than the first 3 chapters to set it up, obviously. It's not fast to world build. But what we do see is this system of blood and tattoos start making its way at the beginning. And that just expands through the rest of the series. For me, at least, that just felt magical because you don't usually see magic systems dictated by tattoos. Blood magic, that's not uncommon. It's not common, but it's not uncommon. But tattoos are a fresh spin on it. And I think there's something really cool, and it's a little too early and a little too pre-caffeine for me to figure out what exactly that is about dictating a magical system that identifies tattoos as mystical and magical and something of power. I'm realizing now that I actually know what it is, because as much as I would love my tattoos to be wards or runes or something that I could just sort of steal off my body to funnel magical power through me, unfortunately, the real world has not quite caught up with that. Nor have my tattoos. My tattoos just stay on my body, no matter how much I love them. But they are transformative. And this series understands the transformative nature of tattoos. It recognizes that in getting them, you are creating a sort of magic tapestry of your body. And that is really, really, really cool and really unique because you don't hear that conversation a lot surrounding tattoos. There's an older generation that thinks when you get a tattoo, you're ruining your life. You're not. Fun fact. There's a younger generation that thinks tattoos need to be wholly meaningful. They can be. For me, my first tattoos were, and even my most recent tattoos were, but in the middle, there was just shit that I was like, hey, that's pretty. I want it on my body. But I think it's something really incredible to say that the art that you put on your body has magic. And I loved that element of the Gilded Blood magical system. There are also a lot of elements associated with blood types and things like that. And frankly, I have forgotten all of the blood types. I'm just really glad that they have a full list in the book because otherwise I would never remember it. But it's a really unexpectedly scientific way to approach magic and world building. Super solid, super beautiful. And conceptually, we are also introduced in the first 3 chapters to Zayn, Talia's hot incubus boss. We don't actually see him because Zayn is off-world doing an adventure. Bilbo Baggins-like, he has run into the world of the Fae to go on an adventure. Not a good, fun adventure, but an adventure nonetheless. And this is really the first experience that we have of Zayn as an absolute damsel in distress. He tries. Lord, does he try to keep Talia safe. And for the most part, in the Fae world, he does that really well. But Talia is nobody's idea of a shrinking violet. And any time that Zayn tells her, I need you to take a back seat. I need you to calm down, and I need you to let me handle whatever god-awful danger we are now in. Anytime Zayn tells her that, Talia's like, hold my fucking beer, I'm going in right goddamn now. And Zayn is just like, I don't understand the question. I asked you to sit. And she's like, I'm taking care of this. I am powerful, I am woman, hear me roar, and you can just go sit over in the sitting area of Macy's and chill while I take care of business. For a character who is an absolute hot mess like Talia is, I felt so seen by Talia in those first 3 chapters because she was a dumpster fire. That's not to say she didn't have cause to be a dumpster fire. Like, there was a butt cobra that she did not expect. There was a passed out client that was showing her his ass. Quite literally showing her his ass. There was a missing hot boss. And then she goes into Hot Boss's apartment and finds a bird who is now demanding assistance. I would be a hot mess under those circumstances too. But those first chapters, I fell in love with Talia just a little bit in those first few chapters, because I don't know about y'all, but I have absolutely had that conversation with myself where I'm like, oh, as any totally functional adult would. My therapist lectures me on that. She's like, that's maladaptive thinking. And it is. It absolutely is. However, it doesn't change the fact that every time I do something and I'm like, oh, that is not what an adult would do, I fill in the blanks by going, like any sane, functional adult would do. And so as Talia sort of does these judgmental elements of herself, just goes through life just judging her own experiences, her own actions. Yeah, I felt seen. And then, when she actually does get into the vicinity of her hot boss, who is annoyingly attractive, we have the art in the omnibus that proves it. At the end of the first 3 chapters, you're also introduced to Biscuit, aka Hibiscus, because that's what Zayn calls his familiar, the bird tattoo. However, despite the fact that Hibiscus is able to call for help pretty eloquently, Hibiscus cannot pronounce their own name. And so as a result, we have Biscuit. Fun fact, we are a Biscuit household. I don't care that his real name, at least as Zayn says it, is Hibiscus. This is a Biscuit household. But Biscuit is our favorite jungle Birb, familiar that he is. And Zayn and Talia end up co-parenting this bird that is addicted to almonds and marzipan in like the cutest way possible. They just love him so much. And then somehow over the course of the series keep picking up fresh familiars and co-parenting the absolute hell out of them. It's adorable. In addition to meeting my absolute fave, Biscuit, you also got to meet, albeit through a phone call, my second side character fave, which is DeeDee, Talia's mother. My grandmother was born and raised in New York and sounded in my head exactly the way that DeeDee does. And actually, in real life, she sounded exactly the way that DeeDee does. And so there's a little part of reading Gilded Blood where I feel like my grandmother is back in all her love and all of her imperfections. So when I asked Rachel whether I was okay to do a premiere of Inked so I could feature how amazing the series is, I actually started breaking out some of the old things that I have for my grandmother, including like old videos and stuff like that, because I wanted to get the voice right. My grandmother had one of the heaviest New York accents I've ever had the pleasure of hearing in my life. And so I drew on all of that to embody DeeDee. And actually Rachel and I went back and forth, like, oh, I just remembered what the critical element of that New York accent was. And it's treating every ah sound as an aw with an AW. So calling becomes qualling, talking becomes talking. And then Rachel goes, oh, and how basically every O sound became ah. So orange became orange, Florida became Florida, and for some odd reason, my grandmother was always pitched in tone about an octave higher than anybody else around her. Don't understand why. So we started talking, and I'm like, oh, DeeDee is just gonna sound like my grandmother. So I hope that y'all enjoyed the return of my grandmother just for this viewing experience, because it actually made me feel like my grandmother was in the room with me. So, if you, like me, fell in love with Inked just based off the first 3 chapters, please go check it out. Rachel is an unbelievably amazing human being. She is incredible. And the Gilded Blood series is so good. all 4 of them will just make you so happy. Because unlike a lot of romantasies, it doesn't mire itself in its own seriousness. It tackles dark topics, but it doesn't lose its wit and charm when doing so. And that is the mark of a really, really good world building book. And so the magic comes from the world, not necessarily the interactions, at least early in the book. That's not the case with Inked. That's not the case with the Gilded Blood series as a whole. So please go check it out. You can find copies on Amazon. It's also on Kindle Unlimited. You can also go find deluxe color editions that you can get signed through Rachel's website, in addition to pre-ordering the Kickstarter in either that beautiful iridescent or the stunningly classy gold. If you enjoyed Inked, please go give it a read. Go give it a buy. I would love for y'all to experience Rachel Rener and her worlds just the same as I do. As always, thank you for joining us here at the Moonlit Library. Thank you for your understanding of the technical difficulties. As you can see, we are back in the gaming lair. And if you want to keep seeing these videos, please feel free to go give us a subscribe. I love hearing from y'all, so drop any thoughts that you might have in the comments about who I should work with next. I would love to hear the authors you'd love to see going forward. As always, thank you,